Women in Horror Month is an international grassroots initiative which encourages supporters to learn about and showcase the underrepresented work of women in the horror industries. Whether they are on the screen, behind the scenes, or contributing to in other various artistic ways, it is clear that women love, appreciate, and contribute to the horror genre. Women in Horror Month celebrates these contributors to horror throughout the year via the official Women in Horror Month blog, Axewound, the Axewound Film Festival, and with the official Women in Horror Month event project database in February. If you would like more information or to find events in your area, visit womeninhorrormonth.com. They also have a really, really great store with cool designs on various products. I have a bunch of shirts from them, and I'm always looking forward to seeing their new designs every year. Also, I recently saw a flyer on Facebook. If any of our listeners are in the Seattle, Washington area, Ghouls of the Crypt and Scarecrow Video are celebrating Women in Horror Month by giving to the community and helping women in need. You can bring feminine hygiene products for donation to Scarecrow throughout the month of February. These donations will be distributed to local women's shelters.
On this episode of Horror Melee, we're interviewing Tracee Beebe, an award-winning screenwriter and producer based out of Austin, Texas. Her shark script, Deep Water, was in the top 3 of last year's Bloodlist scripts, and her company's horror short, Date from Hell, is currently streaming on Alter and in development for a feature film.
Hi, everybody. Woohoo, women in horror. Woohoo. Date from Hell is a horror short. That one was directed by Ven Scott, and it's an Indignant Dog Films project. So yeah, we're actually heading out to LA to take some meetings on the feature for it and hopefully get the ball rolling on it.
Wow, that is so exciting.
Yeah, it's very exciting. It's a fun female empowerment horror story, kind of a little bit of an homage to 80s stuff, but takes a lot of the tropes and turns them on their head. And you always have that question, why does she run into the woods instead of going to the cops? Well, we give you a really good answer for that one.
Yeah, I gotta say, like the first time I watched Date from Hell, I was thinking to myself, why? So it was. I'm glad that was intentional.
Yes.
Yeah, I had that same reaction.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about Indignant Dog Films and how that project gets started.
We're brand new, so we just formed this year. And when we went into production on the Date from Hell short, then that was kind of his baby, his brainchild. It was going to be his directorial debut, and he had a little script written on it, and they got in touch with me. He and our cinematographer, who's also our third partner on Indignant Dogs, they got in touch with me to see if I would do a pass on the script and kind of give it a little more meat and, the female touch. I did, and they really liked what I did, and then so they brought me in as a producer on the project, and we got that movie made, and it was just supposed to be kind of a little small, hey, let's try to make a movie kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But we were able to turn it into something quite a bit bigger and got a little bit of money behind it. And it turned into something that people are really liking. We're really proud of that one. And then we were able to get it in front of Alter. And so it now is available on Alter streaming. So we're really, really pleased to be a part of their family. Because we work so well together on that film, we decided, hey, we should do more of that. And so we put together Indignant Dog Films as our little company.
Nice.
And we're mostly focused, not 100% focused on horror, but that is definitely our main thing. We love doing the horror shorts, but with the intention that they all can be standalone films that people can stream on Alter or even YouTube or Amazon or whatever, but that also can serve as a proof of concept for bigger projects.
I got a question about that. When you're writing these short horror films that, you're like, well, I want this to be capable of being a feature length. What's the writing process in that? Does that differ? Like, do you like, oh, this story is really kind of, not feature length worthy?
It really depends. So sometimes we'll reverse engineer it. We'll have a feature concept in mind and then find a piece of that can be a standalone piece and write it separately. I don't like to, I think that there's a lot of people who will just take a scene or a moment from, or act one or whatever from their horror, and that's fine. But I like that piece to be able to be strong enough to truly stand on its own as its own story. So if I reverse engineer it like that, I will write it separately, not just take it out and shoot it. A lot of times, though, we will start with a short concept, write it as a short, and then build the world around that. That's kind of what we're doing with Date from Hell and the next one that we're doing this weekend. So it depends. It just varies, I guess. It depends if that answers your question. It depends on the project. Sometimes we'll have a feature script. Mostly I write features. I write feature specs or on assignment, and that's where I like to live. But a lot of times we'll have a project that we're looking to get investments on or that sort of thing, and so then we need that proof of concept. But I don't want it to just be a proof of concept. I don't want it to just be a trailer or teaser or whatever. Definitely like it to be able to stand on its own, because then it can do the festivals and it can get on streaming and all that.
Yeah, I see a lot of those proof of concept on YouTube and Vimeo and stuff like that, and there's not a lot of substance to them. It's just like, this is a scene.
Right. And to me, if you're going to spend the money and the time and the effort and the blood, sweat, and tears to make a proof of concept, you might as well make something that can make it get into festivals or get streamed, Yeah. That's our theory anyway.
So I saw that Date from Hell had a budget of $10,000. Where do you get your funding? Do you self-fund or do you do outreach?
It depends on the project. We did a little bit of crowdfunding for Date from Hell. Some of that was self-funded, credit cards, borrowing, and stealing wherever we could. The last project we did, which hasn't been released yet, our goal on that one was to see how big of an impactful story we could tell with the least amount of money. And so we had a total skeleton crew on that one, and we shot in a closet. The entire thing is shot in a closet, except for the last scene running away from the closet. Very intense and scary and heart-wrenching story, I think. Of course, I wrote it, so I have to think that. Again, it depends on the project. So that one we self-funded as well because it was a total micro budget. As we're moving forward into some of these bigger projects, we have several feature films that we're in development on right now. We're working with investors and bringing on investors. And then we're working on, might be top secret, but we are working toward putting a horror anthology together, and we'll be doing some crowdfunding for that. We're really excited about that one. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah, you guys have a lot of projects in the pipeline.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that that's important to not just have one thing, because you never know which one thing is going to hit. The balance, of course, then is not to be shiny object bouncing from one thing to the other. We want to be healthy in the choices we're making and the progress we're making. So when we have those multiple projects, it's not that we're watering down our stable of things. We have each one serves a different purpose, and each one is at different levels of production or pre-development or that sort of thing. So we're not shooting 20 things this week. We're lining them up. One supports the next and that sort of thing. So we're trying to be really smart and, like I said, kind of healthy about the way we go about it.
Thinking about your writing process. So on these projects, when you write, what is your role within all of these projects? Because you mentioned producer, you're a writer. Are you going to step into some directing?
I never say never, but it is not my intention to direct. I am a writer at heart. Like, that is my main thing, whether I'm writing for Indignant Dog Films or I'm writing for a company out in LA or working on my spec scripts to then get sold out there. That's my main thing is as a writer. And I had said, oh, I'm never going to produce. I don't want to be a producer. I'm just a writer. But then I found that I really enjoy the pulling the pieces together and bossing people around a little bit, making sure people show up to do their job and being the support that my director, my cinematographer needs so that they can do their job to the best of their ability. I really enjoy that side of it. I mean, there may be a project just for fun that I'll direct. And every once in a while, Ven is also an actor. So every once in a while, if he's going to be on camera, I might step in to direct a little bit. So I will do that once in a while. And it's not that I don't enjoy it. I have this kind of personal pet peeve. I've heard so many times where a director will say, oh, I wrote this thing just because I needed a thing to direct. And I know, like, literally 2,000 screenwriters who would have wrote that for you, and it would have given them a produced credit, and then you would have had something that's solid, and you would have given that writer a chance. I don't want to do the flip side of that and take away from a director. That's not what I'm trying to build my credits in my career on. So let the people who want to direct, and I'll keep doing what I do. But to answer your question about kind of the process within our team, most of the time we'll kind of sit together, we'll do some brainstorming, here's some concepts, and then I will go and write the first draft. And then sometimes, depending on the project, either Ben will take a pass on it or Brandon will take a pass on it, and then I'll polish it back up again. Occasionally the opposite is true. Ven also does some writing, and Brandon's kind of dabbling in that a little bit as well. We'll brainstorm the concepts together. I'll help them make sure that we're following some structure within the story and it's not just a bunch of series of cool things happening. But making sure to honor the original vision of it all.
Yeah, I was going to ask if when you have a script and you're finished, you've polished it up, it's what you want it to be, do you maintain that creative control or do you just give it over to the director? But it sounds like the three of you have a very good way of working with each other where you're able to kind of step in and say like, oh, stay on track.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the number one reason that we decided to form the company and keep doing more projects together, is that we all have so much respect for each other. We're all very confident in the things that we do, but we also don't have over an abundance of ego either. So there's nobody ever gets their toes stepped on, and nobody's afraid to say, hey, that's crap, let's not do that. When I say that, or when one of the others says that, we listen and we are able to talk through it, and the stories get better because of it. When I'm writing for somebody else, like I have a project out now, actually 2 features out in LA right now, that one has a director attached now and one they're working on attaching a director to. Once that director comes on, they may give me some notes. We love all of this, except I'd really like to see this happen or this happen, and I'll go back in, do some rewrites on it, but then I have to hand it over, and I don't have any control at that point, and that's okay. Filmmaking, no matter if you're talking about a 3-person little indie team or a giant studio project, it's so collaborative, and I think it is super important as a screenwriter that you understand that. If you can't understand that, when you hold your story or your own words super precious, you're doing that story a disservice. When you allow that, take the ego out of it and allow that collaboration to happen, magic happens, and the story turns into something so much bigger and more amazing than I ever could have thought of. So I actually love that part of it. But I know that sometimes it can be like, but that's not what I meant. But you changed that completely. But that's part of it, and that's okay. And I'll just write the next one.
I know a lot of writers who constantly think and worry about the audience and what the audience is going to think about their story, so they kind of cater their whole script or screenplay to the audience. Do you do that with your scripts, or do you feel like this is my story, this is what I want to get out?
Oh, it's absolutely. This is my story. This is the story I have to get out. Like
Yeah.
most of the time, the stories are like, this is what it is. It's just my job to get it on the page, and then what happens after that, that's that's the audience's job or the director's job or the producer, whatever. That being said, it is super important to know my intended audience. If I'm writing a really bloody, gory, slaughter after slaughter type of project, I can't be also then thinking that it's going to be a kids show, right? Like I have to make sure that it all kind of, then that comes down to not only what we're seeing, but what the dialogue is, and what the themes are. Thematic themes really come into play there when you're thinking about your audience. There's a difference between like catering to the audience versus knowing who you want your audience to be, I guess.
It sounds like you're really passionate about writing, and I'm interested to know what started your interest in screenwriting.
I am really passionate about writing. I'm so grateful for writing in my life. I actually was a horse trainer for the first half of my life. That was what I was born to do. That's what I was going to do. I became a professional horse trainer at the age of 14 and never looked back. Built my life around that and had one of the biggest riding stables in the county and did pony camps, and then started a nonprofit horse rescue. Like that was my world. And then I got very, very sick and couldn't do that anymore. And so I spent 2 years dying. And there came a moment where it was like, okay, I've either got to get busy living or get busy dying. I was in a wheelchair and I was bedridden most of the time. I couldn't drive anymore. Like the horse thing was definitely off the table. So who I saw myself as was just gone. And so like in high school and as a kid, I'd always loved to write little stories, but it was never the thing I was going to do. I found this creative writing class that was starting like that day, 2 miles from my house. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go do that because I've got to get out of this bed. It's close enough I can get there. If I can't get myself home, I at least have, it's close enough somebody can come pick me up. So I wrote a little short story about a horse trainer who was dying and, kind of put all of my grief and my loss and all of that into that story. And it was heart-wrenching and overwritten and all of that, but it was my therapy in that moment. And I thought, hey, what would be cool would be to turn this into a movie. And so I wrote, I looked Googled how to write a screenplay, and so kind of taught myself at least not the structure, but like the format of screenwriting. And then I loved it, and I read it to people, and their faces lit up, and I thought, man, this is kind of cool. I should do this more. And then like within a couple of weeks, a friend said, hey, there's a screenwriting conference happening. Do you want to go? I said, yeah, that's great, but the tickets are like $500. And he said, no, here's a ticket, go.
Wow.
I know, right? And while I was there, I got to pitch this to some studios. And I had no idea what I was doing, but I was pitching to like Lifetime and DreamWorks and like big studios. Again, faces were lighting up, and I'm like, oh yes, here we go. This is the universe saying, you might have lost this, but your life isn't over. Now you have a new purpose. Screenwriting saved my life. And so, yeah, I am really fucking passionate about it.
Wow.
That's amazing.
That's awesome.
That just like, I don't even get me started on the universe and
Right?
destiny and stuff like that.
For about 2 years, it was like, no, keep doing this. More and more of those same things, like here's the ticket or here's this or whatever. It was absolutely, this is what I was born to do. I'm really, really grateful for it and for every opportunity that keeps showing up for me.
What draws you to the horror genre?
Yeah, how do you go from like this like touching story of a young horse trainer, you're pitching to Lifetime, and then you like
it's a little different.
Yeah.
It's kind of twofold. I mean, really, I always just say I love to make people cry. Like if I can make people cry through my stories, through my movies, then I know I've done my job. Well, now it's if I can make people feel and scare them then I've reached them.
Mm.
Fear is such a primal emotion. It's like some people, you may even say it's like our only true emotion, right? So if I can reach them on that level and then maybe like sneak a message in or a theme underneath that so that they come out scared, emotional, moved in some way, but also, oh, hey, I didn't realize it, but I may have learned something, or I didn't think about that. It's bringing questions up and making them think and feel and moving them. It's no different than breaking their hearts, making them cry, to being scared out of their minds. And then, they come out of the theater having felt something. And I guess that's that correlation for me. The transition, though, really happened because of Date from Hell. That was the first horror that I really got involved in. And I really enjoyed that process because you can kind of do all these fun things. But again, like even Date from Hell is just a sort of fun, mildly tropey story, but there's some good themes underneath there. And so I enjoy that process. But really, it comes down to Jaws. So when I was 5 years old, my babysitter thought it would be a cool idea to go see this new movie. You got to remember that back then, the scariest thing we ever saw was like Scooby-Doo, right? So I'm sitting in the dark theater and that soundtrack comes on and I didn't get in a bathtub for like years. I honestly, I was a big swimmer and I still, like, up until I was 30, wouldn't get in a swimming pool without other people around. Like, that affected me that much. I am part of that Jaws generation. And that's why, because it stuck with me. It affected me. And it affected me in deeper ways than just being afraid to get in the water. Like, I actually credit that movie with kind of being the badass that I am, because I had to get to the point where I decided, well, I really love to swim, but I'm going to die if I get in the water. So are you going to let your fears control you, or are you going to do the thing despite the fear? And so everything that I've done, even becoming a screenwriter, has sort of been that. Like, if I can affect one person the way that Jaws affected me, I've succeeded at life.
Yeah, that's amazing.
One of the scripts that's out in LA right now with the producer is I've got to write my own shark script, and it was the number 3 script on the Blood list last year. Yay for shark movies. I am a Jaws nerd, and that's my long story of how I got into horror.
Do you get into Shark Week, and have you ever swam with sharks?
So I love Shark Week as much as it scares me. I love to snorkel. I get in the ocean every chance I can, knowing perfectly well that every time I do, I might not make it out alive, but that's not such a bad way to go, I guess. And I have swam with whale sharks. Which is scary in itself because you're out in open water. You have to be out way, because they're, huge. They're 40, 50, 70 feet long, and they're just massive. So you're out in the way, way open water, and you have to jump in the water from a moving boat to get alongside them. But they don't have teeth. And they don't eat. They just eat plankton and stuff. But their mouths are easily big enough to just swallow you whole. So they're scary in that sense. But it's not with great whites. So it's kind of not nearly as terrifying as that. I mean, it was intense. It was one of the coolest things I've ever done. But every once in a while, I would take my focus off of the shark I was swimming beside and look down into the vast darkness below me and be like, oh no. Shit, what am I doing out here? No, don't look. And go back to, oh, look at the pretty shark.
Still, like, facing fears and overcoming them. I mean, the beauty of the horror genre, there's so much you can do, and so many different people connect with it on so many different levels. It's such a universal genre.
Universal and very personal.
Yes.
And
exactly. Yeah. It's so true. And we all have fears, then they feel so unique to us. But I think that the thing that's so wonderful about the horror genre is that it shows us that we're not alone in our fear of the hand that crawls off the whatever, or the light going off and somebody being there looking in a mirror, all of them.
Yeah.
in those fears, which helps it, feel a little stronger, a little more empowered. Also, one of my favorite reasons, this is why I wrote my shark script actually, is like, in real life, the bad guys don't get eaten by sharks. In real life, the bad guys don't always get, what's coming to them. Justice isn't always served. I really feel like this is why, even for young people, kids even, why horror is such an important part of our lives and part of our society, is it gives us a chance to see someone overcoming truly, literally impossible odds to be the last girl standing and to kill the bad guy, even though he's going to come back in the next movie. At least she lived through that one. You know what I like? Right? I think it's so much of the time, especially as young people, especially as women, we don't get to see our happy ending. Our perpetrator isn't caught, or our bully isn't punished, or whatever that is in your story, in your life. Mm-hmm. So when we see that happen on the screen, it gives us a little bit of hope and a little bit of justification. I mean, the movies in general, I think all of them, whether it's a happy horse girl movie or the bloodiest slasher film, it comes down to hope, inspiring hope. We can all use more of that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
You mentioned specifically women in horror movies. What's it like being a woman in the film industry, especially as a screenwriter? Do you find it more challenging to shop your scripts around compared to male writers?
Well, so I feel the general train of thought is, yes, that it's harder. It's a male-driven industry, white male, blah, 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 blah. I don't want to waste my time with that. Yeah. I'm just going to do my thing, and I'm going to do my thing to the best of my ability, and that is going to pay off. And it does. It has. And it's going to continue to pay off in bigger ways. If I focus my attention and my energy on, oh, poor me, I'm a white chick, nobody's going to give me the time of day, well, then yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen. Instead, I'm going to just keep writing better and better stories and making better and better movies, and that's going to do its thing. I'm not saying that, again, general train of thought, that it's a male-driven industry. Yes, that's true. Mm-hmm. Right now is a really good time to be a female filmmaker because people are starting to open their eyes to that. So our time may be now, or our time is coming. Either way, I got better shit to do than worry about what somebody else is doing.
Hells yeah.
Do you have any advice for any women out there trying to get started in the horror industry or just screenwriting in general?
Absolutely. So again, don't focus on all the reasons why you're going to fail. I see that whether you're a young woman or a 50-year-old white guy. You focus your attention on that, you're wasting your time. So that's number one. Read as many screenplays as you possibly can in the genre that you write and in others. One of the things that has served me super well in transitioning into horror, I think very often writers start out, or filmmakers start out in horror because it's a little easier to break into. It's a little easier to get funding. There's quite a few reasons why there's a lot more indie horror movies than other genres. I started out in the drama world. I spent 8 years learning to write relationships and character. I brought that into the horror world and brought that into my horror writing, and that's serving me really, really well. So don't forget, the best stories come from character. Everything else, happens around it just to show that character, those characters and those relationships working out or not working out, or paying off or not paying off. So don't focus on the biggest, scariest, bloodiest stuff you can. And this is probably the number one thing I would say. Tell the best, most impactful story you can with the least amount of characters and least amount of set pieces, the least amount of locations. Keep it tight, tight, tight. If you can tell a story that hits someone in 4 minutes, then the 90 minutes and 100 minutes are going to be a lot easier. Good at affecting your reader and affecting your audience in each and every little scene, so that when you do write that bigger project, it matters, it means something. Two more things I would say. Build your tribe, especially as screenwriters. We tend to be very introverted. We live a lot inside our head and hang out with our characters in our own little worlds, and it's great. But everybody knows this. This industry is built on who you know. Nobody was born knowing Steven Spielberg or whoever. We build those relationships as we go, and those relationships have to be authentic and they have to be mutually beneficial. So often I see young writers or new writers, reaching out for what they can get for themselves. What can you do for somebody else? What can you give to somebody else will always serve you better in those relationships, and those relationships will carry you forward. And you never know, that PA that you were nice to instead of treating like dirt under your feet could someday be somebody important. But don't go at it thinking they're going to be important. Treat them like the way you want to be treated, like a person. Build those authentic relationships, build that tribe. That tribe is going to serve you really well because you're going to find people that you can trust and that trust you to give you honest feedback, tell you when your stuff is shit so that you don't take it out there before it's ready. And also tell you when, hey, stop your tears. Yeah, that was a rough day. Keep writing. It's going to get better, because I promise you're going to have those days. If you haven't had them yet, you will absolutely. And then lastly, make a movie. I know that sounds like a simple answer, but one of the best things I did for my screenwriting career was to finally make Dog Years. Make a short film. It gets you into the festivals. It gets you networking. It helps you, it educates you in a way that reading and studying books or taking classes or anything else like that will ever do. You finally get that produced credit, and that gets you that farther up the ladder. So don't be afraid to make that movie. One of the things that Indignant Dog Films is doing is kind of making ourselves available to people, writers that are trying to break in, to help them get their movies made. So if you are a writer and you don't know what it takes to get a movie made, obviously, or have the people around you that can make the movie, look for a team to partner with, and you may have to help raise the money and all of that. Don't think you're going to be able to sell that first short script or that first screenplay right off the bat, but get a movie made. So yeah, I mean, I can give you how to break in advice all day long. That's
What's awesome is you also teach. You're a coach for screenwriting. There's so much that you do, and then you also give back. You're not just doing this for yourself, but you're trying to bring people with you as well. And I think that's awesome and inspirational.
Thank you. Thank you for seeing that. I've been very blessed with the people in my life that have mentored me. Together we rise. I say this all the time, and especially as female filmmakers, we gotta bind together. The more we support each other, the more each of us succeeds. So yeah, absolutely. Together we rise, 100%. I started out with people would come to me with horse questions for their screenplays. Like that's kind of how I started out with the giving advice and not coaching particularly, but like I kind of got to be known as that person because that's where my background was. And then because I wasn't a bitch about it and was generous with the knowledge that I did have, that led to more relationships, and people shared their knowledge with me, and it just builds from there.
Last question. Who are some of your biggest influences?
Well, I mean, we could talk all day about Jaws and Steven Spielberg. But let's see. That's a terrible question. I'm really bad with names.
Or if you want to simplify it, what are movies that you tend to go back to because you love so much?
Much better question. Thank you. Well, Jaws. How many times in one interview can I mention Jaws? That could be a drinking game.
I would probably say that. Like,
we'll have a disclaimer beforehand.
Yes.
Stand By Me. I study that one both as a screenplay and as a film. I use that when I'm teaching a lot. The relationships in that, the coming of age story in that, the use of dialogue techniques, the conflict in every single page and every single scene is just phenomenal. Here's a little homework piece for anybody, writer or director, but especially for writers. Go in and watch that first treehouse scene from Stand By Me and count how many different conflicts are going on in that one scene. Some of them are plot conflicts, some of them are dialogue conflicts, some of them are character conflicts, and some of them are just fun conflicts to throw in there. But if you remember that conflict equals drama equals entertainment, that's a beautiful piece to study for sure.
That's amazing. I never ever would have thought to pick apart a scene like that. It's so interesting to look at the scene from that perspective, and you're like, oh, this is why I'm drawn to it. Like you said, because conflict equals drama equals entertainment. People are like, why do you like this movie? And I'm like, I don't know, I just like it. Learning more about, like, no, there's screenwriting, there's all these pieces, and there's a formula there that resonates with you, and that's why.
Exactly. That's another advice for screenwriters or filmmakers in general. Just don't just watch a movie, dissect it, watch it with the screenplay in front of you, find those beats and figure out why. See if you can figure out why the writer or the director chose to do that in that moment. What would you have done different? How does that affect maybe the piece that you're working on? What can you do that like that to influence and elevate your work as well? Any other ones that I fall back on? I'm rewriting. I'm in the rewrite phase of a story. Basically, it's misery but set in the jungle. So I went back. Well, it's based on, I last year rented a scooter while I was on the island in Mexico by myself, and I crashed and I mangled my knee, and then I was trapped with crazy people on a farm, and they wouldn't help me get back to the ferry, and I was stuck there with no phone and no internet. Nothing bad, but
real life horror.
Here's some tea from my garden with my special herbs. And now that you can't go gallivanting off to the beach, you can write my book for me.
No.
I took that.
That is terrifying.
I made it 10 times scarier and brought in some really creepy stuff and Aztec legends and stuff like that. But what I did to make sure I was telling the story to the best of its capacity was I went back and I watched Misery while reading the script and looked for what the rhythm of that story was. It's very contained. 90% of that movie takes place in a farmhouse, in a room. How did they do that without losing the audience? How did they do that? The master of all horror. To tell a story that we care about to that degree, that we stuck with it in a single room without getting bored. I would say Stephen King in general, movies and books, I was reading his stuff from way too young of an age. I watched Jaws when I was 5, and I read it, I was probably only 10.
Wow.
If you haven't read any of King's books, they are, some of his movies are phenomenal, of course, but the books are like, they suck you in and they become all consuming.
They are, yeah.
Stephen King's short story, The Boogeyman, is absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah. And he writes characters so beautifully. He's such a great example of the kind of stuff that I'm trying to do. It is a perfect example of it. It is not about a murderous clown. Right? Like the horror fans, if you're just a person who likes slasher movies and scary movies, then yeah, that's what it's about. But that's not what it's about, right? It's about the monsters. The human monsters are so much scarier and so much more dangerous to those children than that monster ever could be. And it's about the relationships those kids have with each other, or when they're, later on when they're adults, and they're healing each other through those journeys, through those challenges that they're facing. And that comes down to character. And those are the kinds of things I want to write. Absolutely.
I don't think we have any more questions.
Go watch The Date from Hell short and tell everybody that you want to see the feature. Because we're about to go out to Hollywood and make that happen. Go watch Date from Hell on Alter and say, why isn't this a feature? We want the feature film. That would be incredible.
Awesome.
Call your senator.
Exactly. And honestly, I will just say, keep supporting women in horror, keep supporting women in film, and just be nice to each other, you know? That's my thing.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It has been absolutely wonderful talking to you. I'm an artist, different medium, but I feel like after talking to you, like your passion, your love for what you do has like reignited my flame. So
Awesome. Oh my gosh, thank you.
Yeah.
That really means a lot to me to hear that, because I think that as artists, we are called to do our thing, whatever that medium is. And it's our responsibility to show up, and it's so hard. I'm very often inspired by others, and so if I can inspire somebody like that, that really means a lot. So awesome. Thank you.
you can find out more about Tracee Beebe and her upcoming projects at their website, Indignant Dog Film. It is idogfilms.com. That is ID as in dog, OG films.com. You can find Date from Hell on YouTube. You can search for Alter Date from Hell. That's ALTER Date from Hell. Super excited to see the upcoming projects she has.
Thanks for listening, everyone. This has been another great episode of Horror Melee. Check us out at horrormelee.com, Spotify, iTunes, and check us out on social media.
And check out womeninhorrormonth.com for information, resources, projects, events, blogs, and all sorts of other creative media that women in horror are creating and producing.